2027 offensive tackle Cooper Hackett just flipped from the Texas Tech Red Raiders to the Oklahoma Sooners. We're going to take a look at some junior year film here. This was a kid that I watched this past offseason when he's committed to Texas Tech. And watching the sophomore film, what sticks out right away is the length. At 6'6.5", there's no doubt this kid's an offensive tackle, right? He's not a kid that's going to have to kick into the interior offensive line. Just really rare arm length, just length in general. And you got to take into context what 6'6.5" as a sophomore means. None of these kids were 6'6.5" in 8th grade, and most of them probably weren't even 6'6.5" as freshmen in high school. So a lot of times you'll watch these kids with these rare length traits as very young high school prospects, and they just don't know how to move at that length yet, and you can't even fault them, right? You know, they were, what, 5 foot their entire life, and all of a sudden, you know, they're one of the tallest kids that ever went to their high school. You know, it's a lot for a lot of kids to handle, and I think Cooper Hackett, you kind of saw that on the sophomore film, and you don't see that anymore on the junior year film. You know, this kid moves so under control. The agility that this kid has for his length, you know, that's why we're talking about Cooper Hackett being one of the offensive tackle prospects in the country. So, you know, I'm not just going to talk about it. We'll see it on the video here also. He's not going to get tested a whole lot where he has to really protect that outside shoulder, where he has to get some serious depth on his pass sets, but I definitely think that he has the agility to do that. And something that's really encouraging that I didn't see on the sophomore film is a lot more carnage. There's a lot more bodies falling on the ground when Cooper Hackett's making, you know, contact with these kids that he's blocking. You know, that's what you have to see. As an SEC lineman, you know, there has to be bodies hitting the floor, and that's definitely what we see now with Cooper Hackett. But that's really what it is, 6'6.5". That's what gets you excited as a sophomore. Even if we still saw him as a junior and he wasn't exactly sure how to move with that length yet, you know, that's how these videos usually go. But I think as a junior, this kid's very under control for the elite level length that he has. You know, just the finishing ability. He plays with a low pad level also, which is very rare. You know, like I said, a lot of these kids don't really know how to move at 6'6.5". They especially don't know how to stay low at 6'6.5". It's a tough thing to do. Now, he's not going to be a pass rusher for Oklahoma. You know, they just had 10 sacks last game against, I'm blanking on who it was, but, you know, they had 10 sacks. That's not what he's going to do at the next level. The reason I included this clip is to show the flexibility. You know, that ability to just kind of turn and contort his body. That's a good thing. You know, we don't want rigid offensive tackles. I think you can see the fluid hips that he has here. Ole Miss. I think it was Ole Miss. Maybe not. He's playing right tackle here. He kind of forgot to circle himself, but I'll do it for you guys. You know, a lot more, like I said, just people hitting the floor, him finishing these, keeping the legs driving, bodies hitting the ground. Have to see that because you can't teach that mentality at the next level. It's one of those things that's pretty fixed in these kids. Yeah, he's playing right tackle, so these aren't even like full season highlights, right? A lot of these kids, they'll have 10 games in their season and you'll watch the first 10 plays and they're the 10 pancakes that the kid had all season. You know, these are from 4 games. The first 3 clips were from the same game. So definitely see him being a lot more effective, I think, this season. He was a good football player last year, but, you know, at 6'6.5", like I said, it just didn't look like all put together yet. I definitely think Cooper Hackett now understands how to move at 6'6.5", but we'll cut it off there. You know, I think I only needed like 3 or 4 clips. You guys let me know what you think about him. At the end of the day, that's why I make these videos, to kind of start the conversation. I'm curious to hear what Oklahoma fans see with him. Oh, one more thing I got to point out, 250 pounds, right? He's going to have to put on a whole lot of weight. I'm not worried about it. I never get worried about these kids putting on weight unless they look like that they can't. I always am going to trust these, especially these SEC strength and conditioning and nutrition programs. You know how much money that Oklahoma Athletics spells, how much money Oklahoma Athletics spends on strength and conditioning and nutrition. You know, it's they got this shit down to a science. So if you're an Oklahoma fan, you look at 250 pounds and you're like, oh, this kid can't play offensive tackle. Well, he's also a junior in high school, and if he enrolls early, you know, I'm sure this kid would already be pushing 300. And I never get worried about that stuff, but it is something that's going to happen because right now at 250, you know, he's a bit underweight. But, you know, at the end of the day, I'm going to trust these SEC strength and conditioning programs. That was Cooper Hackett. You guys let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.